Hello. I can't hear you, so hopefully the users or other people can.
Those are the gremlins that we're dealing with. So welcome to the SSE Forum presented by InfoSec Live. I'm John Spiegel, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jay Tillson. Jay, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone, and it's good to see everyone again. I noticed there are some names in the chat from when we've spoken and done this stuff before, so it's great to have everyone back. I'd like to thank Simon for letting us host this, and I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about the state of SASE in 2024. We have two incredible guests that we'll bring on in a few minutes to dive into the various topics that you need to know about if you're looking at SASE or SSE this year. So let's talk a little bit about the SSE Forum. This is a group that Jay and I formed in early 2022, and it was really in response to, honestly, there wasn't a group out there really talking about how do you implement this technology, what are the best practices, and really trying to show people the success you can have, and as well how to avoid the potholes that you will encounter on your journey. So we formed the group in again 2022. It was really more of a closed meeting that we would bring together basically people who had implemented this technology or were in the process of implementing this technology. But we also realized that we wanted to open it up. We wanted to basically democratize these conversations. And when Simon reached out to us and said, "Hey, I'm willing to provide the platform," we could not say no to that. So Jay, let's level set first. Why don't you define what SASE is and really why it's needed in today's IT environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question I get asked all the time. And really, it's an architecture that SASE came up with in 2019. It was really all about bringing together networking or connectivity and security, which is something that is obviously important to both of us. In 2021, they further defined it. So they then defined it as networking, which I class as the left-hand side of the architecture. And the right-hand side of the architecture really became SSE, Secure Service Edge, which is broken down into a whole another set of acronyms. You've got Zero Trust Network Access, ZTNA, Secure Web Gateway, SWIG, CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker, and DEM, Digital Experience Monitoring. And really, for me, it's all about bringing together that connectivity, the SD-WAN elements, WAN optimization, etc., and security. And it's something that, as I said, is important to both me and you. It's something that we've done throughout our careers. And I think we've finally got to a point, I guess, within IT and cyber where there's a shift now. Our users are all over the world in different places. No longer are they confined to the office locations. We live in this hybrid world where they're on the road, they're in hotels, they're in airports, they're working at home in coffee shops or back on the LAN. And data's everywhere as well. So data's in the cloud, on-prem, in SaaS, in the internet, etc. So really it's become extremely prevalent in the world we live in today to allow people quick and easy access and efficient access, that connectivity element, but in a secure way. We've seen ransomware is on the rise. It's rising every year. It's getting more sophisticated. There are more attackers. And on top of that, zero trust is becoming a thing again. And you can listen to the podcast where we talk about zero trust. But I think it's really a shift in the workforce, and that kind of constant threat of cyber attack around us that is really leading us on this path.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there in the shift of the workforce. But I think the other hand that you may not have mentioned or just didn't really make clear is applications. Our applications, back in the 2000s, really lived in the private data center, and security was, fundamentally performed by that massive firewall, so that castle and moat type structure. That changed with cloud. The advent of SaaS applications, PaaS applications, being able to put those loads that previously were in the data center into one of the major clouds. That has been the other driver for SASE. So it's a response to the modern workforce. I saw a comment around working from Starbucks on the Wi-Fi. That's a relevant situation where you have essentially employees starting their day here, at home, going to the cafe, then going to the office, then maybe again at the cafe, or maybe it's the airport or wherever it may be, and then ending their day at the home. The ability for that network and that security mechanism to follow them throughout the day in a single policy manner, it's critical. The complexity that we would otherwise have is a problem for networking and also security professionals. So I think that's really what SSE and SASE bring together. So
I think really for me, it's all about consolidation. I mean, I was speaking to a potential customer this morning, and they had 17 security tools on-prem, 17 pieces of hardware that could be replaced by SSE. And so for me, and I know you're the same, things have to be simple. We have to move in a direction of simplicity, and consolidation really for me is leading us towards that simplicity. I mean, we should be able to change the way we've done things. No longer should we be feeding and watering all this hardware, going through hardware refreshes and firmware patches and all of these things. And we would have all seen in the news over the last few weeks that one of the big VPN vendors is being compromised and under attack, and that a lot of that is because of either it's legacy and it's old, or because it's never been patched, it's never been kept up to date. And when you have 17 tools that you have to patch on a regular basis, trying to get the downtime to patch those tools is really, really difficult. So moving more towards a consolidated architecture, which SASE and SSE is all about, and not only that, it's hosted by somebody else, you do away with a lot of that complexity. And really, for me, that is what breeds really good security design, is that simplicity, right? So not only simplicity for the users, but for the IT teams as well. It makes everything better.
Yeah, and that's driving a lot of the market dynamics these days. So the consolidation of what were previously point products could be a SWIG, could be a firewall, VPN concentrator that you mentioned, bringing those together under one roof, one vendor, whether it's a platform approach or a portfolio approach, that the leaders of networking and security in the enterprise are always being asked to do more with less, and that is one of the market dynamics of SASE. So right now, according to Dell'Oro, the SASE market is expected to grow to revenues of over 10 billion. The total addressable market of this framework is expected to be north of 30 billion. So really what we're seeing right now is that finally that software-defined revolution that really started with cloud and also with virtualization within the platform space, whether that's the server or the storage, is finally now hitting the network and security arena. So we do expect over the next 3 to 5 years to see how networking and security are delivered for the enterprise, whether that's the remote user or even on the campus. And that's another topic we're going to talk about today, is going to be changed, very similar to what we saw in the early 2000s and into 2010. So Jay, let's talk a little bit about some of the sample vendors in the space, and then we'll get on to our guests.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of vendors, as we've just talked about. Consolidation's key. So we've seen vendors out there consolidate. I think the most famous one has got to be Zscaler. They really started with their secure web gateway, and then they developed a ZTNA product, and then obviously SSE came along, and they sell wider SSE, and recently they just released an SD-WAN offering as well. Which I did find quite amusing, given that Jay Chowdhury was very much against SD-WAN for a long period of time. But it just goes to show the drive towards SASE, right? And the large vendors are moving in that direction. I think other players out there are Netscope. Equally, they also purchased an SD-WAN company to offer the full SASE offering. HPE obviously acquired Axis, the company that we've obviously come from and are familiar with. Again, to really go with their SD-WAN offering, add in an SSE offering to offer a full SASE offering. There are many out there, and like I said, consolidation is pretty key. So the vendors are consolidating as well, and the market's consolidating. I don't know if there's anyone else you want to mention as well.
No, I think you've hit the top ones. Obviously, Cisco has announced several SSE-oriented products as part of their Cisco Live, which is happening in Europe this week. Then you have the other major vendors, Palo Alto Networks, growing rapidly. I think approaching 100 billion in I don't know if it's revenues, but certainly market cap. So one of the biggest security players out there. And then there's also some changes going on with Checkpoint, their longtime CEO and one of the founders. Recently announced he's going to step down, so we'll probably see some changes there. And with their acquisition of Perimeter 81 last year, we'll probably see some acceleration. So we're seeing the network and security focus or vendors really coalescing on this framework. And with that, let's bring in our guests and run through some questions with them. So let's bring on Ray and Evgeniy.
Hello, hello. It's been a while, guys.
Hello, Ray, Roy, and Evgeniy. Roy, why don't you start off by introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Roy Chua. I'm the principal analyst at a very small research and analysis firm called AvidThink, and we've been doing this for about 10 years, originally part of a media company called SDX Central, which I co-founded in 2012. And the last 5 years, we've been independent. We cover mostly infrastructure technologies, including security.
All right, thank you for coming on, and we're going to be looking into grabbing some of those insights from you. Evgeniy.
I'm Evgeniy, been on the show several times. I don't know why Simon keep inviting me back, and John and Jay, you as well. Been kind of following SASE quite a long time, been in network security for 20 years. Checkpoint Palo Alto, actually used to work at Checkpoint. I had a one-on-one with Gil in 2006 as well. I was the guy that asked Gil, because I was in QA, and he asked, what's missing in your work? And I told him I really want a different color cables for RG45 to understand what's internal DMZ and external. And when I exited the interview and told about my manager, he told me, like, are you stupid? You're talking to the CEO and you're asking for different colored cables? I got the cables 2 weeks after, so...
Yeah, I actually did that one time when I was working for a company, and we wanted to differentiate what was the DMZ versus the internet and versus what was internal, and yeah, different color cables. So you were onto something there. He should have marketed that and sold them.
Besides this, I spent 16 years in a company called Horjovec Group, one of the big, during this time, MSS providers that were owned by Robert Horjovec. As I say, I graduated last year. I have my own consulting company. I mainly consult to VARs, MSSPs, and vendors. I have also a podcast, a small conference, and a couple of other stuff as well.
Awesome. So, gentlemen, let's get into it. Question number one. One of the key drivers for the growth of SASE has been hybrid work. We're seeing more and more in the news about employees or leadership wanting employees back into the office. Thoughts on, will this impact the growth of SASE? Will it slow it down?
Who's starting? There are so many smart people here. Who do you want to start?
I think you should start. You spoke first.
I spoke first. I'm good with that. I think, in a way, the entire idea started even before the pandemic. So we already saw, as you mentioned, people working from Starbucks. I'm sure everybody that's here in the room and even listening to us have a laptop. If you have a desktop, you're probably playing games or doing some VR. So it's mean you're already mobile. And the time when we expected to drop everything, go home, and not do anything is not there anymore. We expected to be connected most of the time. We expect to be connected from different locations and ideas. So we already started this before the pandemic. The pandemic just kind of put it through the roof, and everybody understood how important it is. And many companies, not all of them, already went to this road to have a SASE, SSE, products vendor, whatever we want to call this. So I don't think they're going to stop it. I think people already understanding and thinking how they can improve it. Also, you guys mentioned before that the interesting move by many SASE, SSE vendors right now of having SD-WAN equipment. So the entire idea that a vendor can give everything. So as a company, I can traditionally use MPLS, can go away from MPLS to SASE, SSE, SD-WAN, can still continue doing this. So there is a benefit on the network level, there is a benefit on the ROI, return on investment, there's a benefit on security, and there's also benefit how do I control the policy, because I can do it from one spot.
Yeah, I would agree with Evgeniy. I think, fundamentally the drive was already there to begin with. I mean, SD went first, right, followed by sort of SASE or the SSE components, which were progressing independently. And so when the pandemic came, SD went to remote branch offices, became less relevant. Obviously corporate office became less relevant, and it was all about how do we secure all the users at home, and there was already work from anywhere. So I think fundamentally, what we saw originally with the pandemic was more of a focus on let's get everyone connected relatively quickly, first VPN and alternatives to VPN. So the SSE component of SASE, I think, sort of took off a little bit more. Now with the return to work, potentially some of the network build outs, some of the SD-WAN initiatives that were paused during the pandemic probably will get restored. But now I think the mindset's different. Now the mindset's more about, all right, how do I enable some kind of zero trust unified foundation from a work from anywhere and access to anywhere type or access to everywhere type foundation. So I think the thinking's a little different, but I think in some sense the return to work is more, or return to offices is more of an orthogonal element. And at this point in time, I think the SASE growth and the components of SASE growth are being driven by other drivers, if you will, at this point.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. And I mean, I agree with both of you. One of the things I'm seeing when I'm out speaking at events and stuff is not many people have really even started this journey. It's the number of people is like probably less than 5%. There's still a huge risk in or a perceived risk in VPN technologies, legacy VPNs. And I think this is one of the main drivers. We've talked about the consolidation elements, and I think that's pretty key as well. And I agree with you, Roy, in regards to Gartner pivoted a little bit and released SSE and kind of took a little bit of focus away from SD-WAN. I think they're equally focused now, maybe a little bit more on the SSE front. And yes, there is a push for people to go back in the office more, but I don't think we're ever going to get back to the 9 till 5. Even if you're working from home one day a week, one day a month, one day every 6 months, or whether it's because you do a little bit of work in the evenings, a bit of overtime, whatever it may be, you still need remote connectivity. And that remote connectivity may not be to an on-prem system anymore. It may be to a SaaS application or something in the cloud. So that drive towards SSE and SASE is still there, and it's more apparent to people today than it was a year ago or 2 years ago when we started the SSE Forum. Back 2 years ago, I was having conversations with people that they didn't even know what it was. They didn't understand it. They didn't get what the differences were. And we met obviously in Paris. It was at the back end of last year, and even since we met then, things have changed. People are now understanding that consolidation is good, that reduction in the number of vendors is good, the reductions in costs are good, security is prevalent and more important today, and that connectivity. So all of those things together add up to this still being very important, and I can still see it moving quite quickly forwards. So go on,
I would say
Sorry, go on, Roy.
No, I was going to say, I think consolidation is good, but I think along with consolidation, there is an implication of simplification or streamlining, because if you just put all the features, like you take sort of Gartner's kitchen sink for SASE, and you say, you know what, I'm just going to create a tab on the browser for every single one of those functions. It's consolidated, but that doesn't mean that you've improved your situation somewhat, right? So I think to the extent that part of the consolidation has to be a streamlining and simplification of the capabilities and the features, because there's a lot of duplication across all those functions that are thrown in the kitchen sink of called SASE. If we can achieve that simultaneously, I think then the benefits accrue to the IT staff, right, and to the companies. But if we just put it all together in one giant bucket, okay, maybe your PO is easier because you send it to one party, but that doesn't help the IT team or the security team.
I want to add a bit more part that you mentioned, that not just consolidation, not just the browser, a lot of the companies move from on-prem infrastructure to SaaS infrastructure or to AWS Azure. So it's even if I'm going back to the office, I'm not accessing my data center. I'm actually going back to the internet. So I need a different way to protect it. So my local firewall may not work for me, whatever the proxy. If you, I don't know if you're using proxy. Do you still use proxy? Do we still even
Some
use
people
the term?
do. Some people do. Some people still use proxy. The SOX proxy lives on, by the way. I mean,
Yes, the side vendors. Who the side vendors belong to right now? The proxy firewall. I mean, I don't think as an industry we're going to a customer and tells them, hey, you should buy my web proxy. I think we went away from this terminology right now. At least I'm sure people are still using that. So yes, so if my data is already living in the internet, then I cannot just protect it while I'm in the office. I need to have a different way to protect it. Doesn't matter where I am. And we may touch about browsers later on and how browsers are related to SSE and SASE and the entire idea of enterprise browsers. And Palo Alto, for example, is the first ones that acquired a vendor in a space. And I think Jaye and John, we spoke last time, where it's going to land. It's going to be the endpoint security or going to be network security? I'm not sure yet.
So I did see a question around third party. So third party risk, I was reading a study, I think in Dark Reading yesterday, 60% of breaches are caused by third parties. Is SASE one of these areas that may help you not only secure third parties, but maybe help enable them? Because third parties aren't going away, whether it's SaaS application or something similar to that. Third-party compliance, how does SASE help you?
Yeah, I would say that the zero trust component, that software is previously called the software-defined perimeter, or whatever you want to call it, right? But the zero trust component of SASE certainly is important, and I've seen increasingly the vendors in the space take that sort of zero trust access, browser-based access to resources, or some kind of dissolvable client access to resources, coupled with a zero trust framework. In some cases, coupled with some lightweight PAM, right? So privilege access controls and all that. Put them together and make that sort of go-to-market solution for third-party vendors because of the risk involved, because of all the breaches and all the worries that we've seen. I think that zero trust framework, coupled with whatever technologies you want to pick from your little SASE basket, I think I'm seeing more of that. The vendors coming to me and say, look, I got a browser. You can provide your third-party access with dissolvable agents or browser-based agents, temporary access SSH type access or telnet-based access in the browser or browser-based RBI type access in the browser to enterprise resources for a short duration, and it's monitored, and it ties into whatever provisioning system you have for identity. It's temporary, and then it goes away after that. Right. So seeing a lot of that coming, at least from a
I
vendor perspective.
definitely think. I mean, obviously, you're aware that both mine and John's backgrounds is being on the customer side, and I came from a manufacturing background, and for me, third-party and contractor access was the scariest part. It was those machines that I didn't want to put a VPN client on because they weren't my machine. I didn't manage them. I couldn't patch them. I couldn't control them. And I certainly didn't want those third parties being able to just connect whenever they wanted. And in fact, being able to take the agent that I'd given them and probably they downloaded and use it wherever they liked. That was really, really scary. And when I speak to people at the moment, when I go out and talk to CISOs and stuff like that, they still see third parties and contractors as that biggest risk. And BYOD, I kind of roll into that as well. So if it's a device that isn't a corporate managed device, whatever that device may be, can you really, do you really want it on your network? And whether that be over a kind of a legacy VPN or whether that be them coming on-prem, sitting down, plugging in or connecting to Wi-Fi, do you really want that device being able to spread malicious, whatever it may be, anywhere? And really, as you said, zero trust comes along to fix a lot of that problems, but how do you go about it? And a lot of what they're saying to me is we want the same policy and same application access or service access for that user wherever they may be. Yes, they're a third party and we don't want to put an agent on, but we want them to have the same look and feel. So Evgeniy, how do you feel about third parties?
I think originally SASE and SSE intended to provide to protect the corporate user, because I have remote access, I have security web gateway, I have a CASB-ish approach to understand where's the data. So it didn't intend to control somebody else to connect. But if the processor need to connect to me from a third party using the same tools, as you guys mentioned, my remote access, I can share a file over OneDrive or whatever it is, a Dropbox, and control this CASB, there is a play there as well. So I think the technology is not fully designed to protect the third party, but it's fully capable to do it. So now it's up to you how you're going to use it. You can take a knife and do something bad. You can take a knife and do something good with the knife. So everything is there. This problem in third party, in my way, is that we're still lacking a better way to understand the risk and understand the access to the data the third party will have. While in the past, majority of the third party used IPsec VPN or maybe MPLS to connect to my data because it was on-prem. Now the data could be in my service now. The data could be in the OneDrive. It could be somewhere else that it's SaaS. That I'm not really the one that's controlling the data. I need other tools like CASB or the new category, I believe it's called CSPM right now, the SaaS security protection, to understand who has access. Like a simple example, if we're recording this session right now using Restream, Zoom, or whatever it is, who has access to this session? Everybody or not, depends on the configuration. So yes, a big part of SASE SSE portfolio can control and protect third parties if used correctly.
All right, so third party is definitely an area to explore if you're into the SASE thing. So let's move on. We've kind of touched on this. ZTNA, it has become more than just a remote access technology. In the recent Gartner strategic roadmap, which Gartner publishes on a yearly basis, kind of giving you the outline of if you're going to implement SASE, here are the things to look out for. They called out, and this was a major change as well, they called out ZTNA to be extended to the campus or the branch network. What are your thoughts? Will this be a driver for adoption, another accelerant to SASE, or are we too early in the evolution for this to be impactful? It's a concept of what we call universal zero trust network access.
Okay, I've got an opinion on this, and I'm sure you know what it is. I mean, I've I've looked at the SASE architecture since it came out in 2019, and I always felt that the LAN was missing from that. Obviously, ZTNA is really what becomes synonymous to VPN replacement or a new version of remote access. It was originally termed Zero Trust Network Architecture and not access, which annoyed me when it changed. But when you look at really the SASE architecture, it does primarily focus on the remote user. Yes, I know from a secure web gateway point of view, you connect it over IPsec from your network, but it doesn't deal with microsegmentation or ACLs or NAC or any of that stuff on the prem. And I will surmise that that's because it primarily came around during the pandemic and a lot less users were on-prem. But our users are not all of them are off the network. I mean, even during the pandemic, I was working for a manufacturing company. You can't manufacture at home. That there was a need to still stay on-prem. So for me, Universal ZTNA, making that architecture a bit broader, making it include that kind of on-premise stuff is critical, because inside a threat is still a major concern. There's still a whole bunch of people on the network, on the LAN and WAN, and that's where a lot of legacy equipment exists. And that legacy equipment is really, for me, my biggest concern, the biggest threat. It's that stuff that you can't patch, or it's 25 plus years old or older. I'm very excited that this has been come to light by Gartner, and for me, it's pretty critical. And sorry to jump in, but I needed to get that off my chest because it's a very exciting part for me and something that I think is pretty key in the next phase.
I wanted to kind of maybe take a step back a bit of listening to us right now. Can we simplify what we're saying here? Is the idea that if I'm in the office and I want to connect to a service or server or whatever it is inside my network or in the remote location, I'm not going directly IP to IP. I'm using ZTNA type of services. It means I don't have direct line of sight connection. I have to go through a proxy in a way to connect to it. Would you agree with this would mean, or does it mean something else here?
I probably would say that I think it depends on how you implement it. There's an implementation detail here, but fundamentally, I think for me, I'm a little biased. One thing I didn't say when we made introductions is I started a company back in 2004 that was sort of zero trust before zero trust. It was network access control using 802.1x and wired and wireless. And we had posture checks, identity checks, all the zero trust policies. It was premature, clearly, back in 04, right? 04, 05. It was right after the Jericho Forum. So it was premature. But if you look at that architecture, the network itself does the enforcement. It is IP to IP, but based on the fact that the network is involved in that connection, it is able to do the enforcement appropriately, right? Whether it's layer 2 VLANs or layer 3 IP enforcement and ACLs, it can do that. So I think it depends on how you implement it. You can always use a proxy. You can do other things with it. But I think the philosophy here, which I do agree with, is that regardless of what you're trying to access, wherever it is, I mean, it should go through the same set of policies, right? Whether you're on the LAN and you have a layer 2 connection, whether it's a layer 3 IP connection somewhere else, whether it's in the VPC in AWS, it should be the same set of unified policies regardless. Now, the enforcement may be different. Enforcement mechanisms may be different. But fundamentally, I would say the same philosophy should apply. Zero trust as an architecture, as a framework, should be everywhere. Not saying it's easy, right? But I'm saying that, it should be everywhere. And I think the recognition of that importance, I think, increasingly will complicate things as we roll it out, but it will simplify things from a security standpoint, because you have a set of unified policies that's based on your identity, based on your device identity and posture, based on the access of whatever data or services, applications you're trying to get to, regardless of where they are. And so from an audit purpose, it should be simpler. Implementation, that's a whole different conversation, right?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the crux of it. Different vendors are going to implement it differently depending on their point of view. And I think that's going to be something we're going to see in 2024, is this concept of universal zero trust, and vendors are going to have a different idea about it. So which one wins? We don't know, but as you're looking at SASE for your business, start to think about that. How do I secure not only my remote workers, my third parties, but start thinking about the campus or the branch, because that's where we're headed. I want to transition over to, we did get a question, and we can start to answer this in maybe two parts. But let's get down to a practitioner level. If I'm a network engineer, I've been doing networking for 20 years. I'm very familiar with routing, and my goal is really to pass packets, pass them efficiently. Why should I really, in 2024, care about SASE? What is in it for me? And, is my job going to change?
I think it's the same idea. Sorry, oh yeah, you go.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think it's similar to if you did cables 20 years ago and put servers, and you missed the idea of AWS, Azure, and GCP coming along. It's similar to SASE, SSE as a service, because as Jay mentioned at the beginning of the show, we are moving from I own the equipment and I put all the nuts and bolts and patching to as a service, whatever it is. I'm getting my patching as a service. I'm getting my equipment patch. I'm getting my network security as a service, my telemetry. Basically, I can focus on my main work as a network architect or security architect versus taking care and do all the things. Yes, I probably will still have local switches, SD-WAN boxes, maybe some small firewalls, but the way I'm routing the information will be different very, very soon. And again, we are slowly transitioning from internal data center security towards SaaS. It's mean majority of the things are going to be delivered by the company going to be in SaaS. So I may going to have less internal routing, less internal DR, less 10 gig aggregation, and more stuff going to the internet.
Yeah, I would agree with Evgeniy. I think, fundamentally that there is a mindset shift here. So for one, I think enterprises no longer look for pure connectivity. Anytime you say the word connectivity, there's an implicit security in there. So I think, it's not about just connecting. You have to secure, because that's now top of mind, right? And that's one. Second is, as a network engineer, as Evgeniy said, you were doing cables and the computers and servers, and you moved to the cloud. If you didn't, it was not great for you. If you did, then all of a sudden you get a salary bump. So from a network engineering standpoint, if you speak SASE, then suddenly your compensation, could go up. Not saying it will, but it could go up. Your available compensation to you sort of goes up. So I think that's an opportunity there. But likewise, I think recognize the fact that there is no connectivity without security. And as Evgeniy said, the solutions are now being SaaSified, well, not the SASE, but the SaaSified, right? As a service, or ASified, I don't know what you call that, right? ASified, as a service. And so recognizing that shift and being able to understand how to take advantage of it, simplify your life, make more money. I think that's why you should care about it.
So Jay, I do want to ask you, you've been in this field and you've seen the transition. What sort of skills, if I'm the network engineer that's focused on CLIs, connecting routers, connecting switches, cabling them up, as Evgeniy would say, what sort of skills should I be looking at to learn to really be successful with this new framework?
I think for me, understanding zero trust is a must. The world's changing, and I know things generally start in the west coast of the US and then travel across the globe. But zero trust is very important in the US. I mean, and again, I know it's been around since 2010, but it's more prevalent now. It's part of the executive order in the US. It's now part of regulations. It's now part of NIST 2, which is like a European regulation. It's slowly coming across the globe. And I think really to echo what Roy said is, you can either choose to be part of this and therefore potentially be more valuable to a business if you understand these things in advance, or you can sit back and watch it kind of flow past you. And that doesn't always end up negatively. I mean, I know people that decided not to ever learn another programming language and still knew COBOL and actually got paid much, much more because they were the only people in the world that know COBOL. I'm not saying that's good to just sit there and remain being a network engineer for the next 30 years because nobody else is. But yeah, zero trust for me is pretty critical place to be. There are training providers out there. A lot of the SSE vendors offer some form of zero trust training. They are very focused on what they do as a vendor. But I think some good stuff to read is the NIST documentation, Department of Defense stuff. Cloud Security Alliance have got a very agnostic zero trust training course. So I think for me, zero trust is a good place to start, because I think, and I mean, don't get me wrong, you need the IT fundamentals. You still need to understand where packets start, how they travel across networks, how they get to the end destination. I very much still believe that those basics and fundamentals are critical. I don't think if you just go and learn zero trust, it can replace a lot of those things. DNS is still probably the root of all evil. So you need to understand subnetting and all of those basics, because I still think you need to understand packet flow. But if you start to learn zero trust, I think it will help you with many things in cyber. And for me, I think that's an important thing.
Anything else to add, gentlemen? All right, so let's move on to one of the questions that we received from, I believe it was David. External events often are our world of technology and security, GDPR, COVID, data breaches, etc. Are we waiting for the next big thing, or how do we convince our business to move forward, to be ahead of the curve? I think really what we're asking here is, how do we help our business understand what SASE is, what SSE can do for you, and how do we convince them to start thinking beyond just today and look into the future?
I can start. I think with every technology, you need to understand the business needs. You need to understand where the company is going. If you're just going to push that it's secure, it's good, this is the best things after sliced bread, the management and the business will not care, because their main business is not security in the majority of the cases. So you need to understand where the business is going, understand the business needs, how is it going to spread, change, remove offices, and then align a story back to storytelling. We've been talking about storytelling for a long time, how SASE, SSE, and this technology can help business needs, and also involve ROI, what can be removed to make sure not just to expand money, but potentially what can go away, how we can consider that on technology as well. So this story with money, with needs, where the company is going, this is the way I will approach this story.
Yeah, agree with Evgeniy. I think fundamentally, sometimes, I think we've hopefully learned this lesson by now, which is on the IT side, you're not selling technology. You can't be pushing technology. That doesn't resonate. You have to address a problem the company is facing at that point in time. What I would say is that one of the advantages of looking at SASE, if you sort of pick the right vendors, back to what Jay was saying about consolidation and streamlining, you could potentially save money, potentially, while not reducing your security, or maybe even improving your security with consolidating multiple functions into one. So from a cost perspective, you're not buying 17 or 20 or 25 different products. From an OpEx perspective, hopefully because it's simplified and streamlined, you're doing more with less, right? And freeing up the team to do other things. I think that some of the elements there. And the third one is, I think eventually, as these frameworks, look, well, as Jay said, this is part of the mandate in the US. You don't have a choice. You have to do it. And so zero trust has to be there. But SASE and some of these other elements, as they make their way into cybersecurity insurance requirements, you'll be forced to show that you are compliant with those as well. And so there's going to be multiple pressure points into the organization to make that happen. But I would approach it, as Evgeniy said, business point of view first, because that's what the owners, the CEOs, the CFOs, the CIO, CFOs talk about and care about. And cost savings, operation excellence, improvement security. I think those are all elements that can come into the picture as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you both. I definitely think that you should not be just selling a technology to a business. You need to understand the vision. You need to understand the biggest risks, and those need to be future things. So yes, you have the risks of today, but also the risks of tomorrow. Like if you don't meet a regulation that you know coming, what happens? If you get compromised and you haven't invested, what is that going to mean? I think you need to sit down and understand the vision of the business, what would make them more efficient, and then you sell the idea, you sell the story. You don't just walk in and say, I want to buy SSE. You need to explain the power of the technology, but in business terms. And John, sorry, I butted in and I know you were going to add something.
Yeah, so I think another element of the question being asked is a lot of times the folks on the front line, they're dealing with the day-to-day. They don't have the opportunity to maybe look over the horizon, see where the new tools are going, maybe invest in time of where the startup industry is going. And because you're so narrowly focused on today, solving today's problems, you're not seeing tomorrow. The question I have is, are there resources to help people really understand where the puck is going and being able to skate toward that? What is the latest in startups? Because a lot of times the technologies, and Jay, you've seen this in your previous life, the technologies that are presented to you are generally presented by big box vendors. So you tend to buy those big box vendors, as well as leadership goes, hey, I'm going to buy that big box vendor solution, but yet you're missing out on that opportunity that some innovative startup has. So are there ways that you've seen in your careers or in your day-to-day life to understand where technology is going and help your leadership skate toward the puck, where the puck's going?
I think one part that I was really missing in the industry was that every time I talk to a vendor, they say, I want to talk to a CISO. And I'm asking them why. And they say, because they are the buyer. And on the other side, we have all this discussion. Is the CISO supposed to be technical or supposed to be a business person? And I believe more intended that the CISO have to be more business with understanding of the security. So why I'm saying this, I really wish that the company will go back to the architecture people, to the designer, to the engineers in the company, and asking them, hey, what the problem we're trying to solve? Where do we need to solve the problem? And not just go, oh, I'm a CISO, I used Zscaler, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Fortinet before. I love what they did. I'm going to use them in my company as well. But that doesn't mean that this particular technology will solve the problem you have in your particular company, because every company is different. It's not apples to apples. So this is, in my way, you need to go to architecture, design, engineers, define the problems, define the traffic flow, define where it's going, and only with that information, go back to the vendors and understand how to solve it, versus, oh, I'm going to just buy this big vendor and then figure out how to put it in my company.
I think
but again,
really,
I think one thing I want to add, and what I'm looking for is, are there avenues to understand what's going on in the industry? Because if I trust my big vendor or it's my VAR, I may not get all the information. What do you recommend?
I think that's a really difficult thing to do. I mean, I think the people on this call are helpful. I mean, Evgeniy, what he does within his career is help people understand what's going on. He has a number of podcasts, in fact, where he interviews people and really tries to get to the bottom of it. Obviously, Roy, I know what you do as well is try and help people. So I think third parties are available to try and unmuddy the waters. Because certainly my experience from a vendor side is the vendors are going to tell you their story that matches their need. And I'm on the vendor side now. And John, the roles we do are kind of evangelist roles where we don't talk about vendors. We talk about solutions and problems. I used to go to events, conferences, and bump into people like Roy and other people on the scene and ask them what's actually happening. Ask my peers in the industry, What are you doing? What works well? What doesn't work well? Use things like LinkedIn, social media, read magazines, etc. Even the SSE Forum, and I know we're talking about our own forum, but part of the reason we started the SSE Forum was really to bring people on that are walking the walk and can talk the talk and can explain without the vendor blurb how these things are working. Even the platform we're on today, what Simon's doing for the community is trying to bring people on that are using the technology or have got experience with the technology. So I don't think there's a magic one. There's not a single answer, but it's using all of those resources, and then obviously using your own background and your experience to come up with that right path. And I think part of the reason it's so hard to be in cyber right now is technology's evolved hugely throughout the pandemic, and maybe that was the only good thing that came out of the pandemic was this massive like this huge amount of innovation and the world changing. But that innovation has led to people not knowing all the technologies. The startup world was moving really, really quickly, and all these startups came along, and I think that's confused the market a little bit, and therefore I don't have an answer to your question, but really it's just about doing that research and talking to people on that path. Roy, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no, I think, in terms of, the analysts do cover the space. So there's multiple analysts that cover the space. You can look at the reports, and, obviously the most famous one is Gartner, and you can look at the Magic Quadrant, and they'll usually give you only large vendors because the cutoff qualifier from a revenue standpoint usually precludes a lot of the smaller players. I think that's just the reality of it. But that's a good starting point, I would say. But conferences and events are good places to do. And there is hard work, as Jay points out. There is no easy solution. There is hard work, right? From an Evgeniy standpoint, understand your business needs first. And then once you know what your business needs, and you go to the conferences and you ask the questions, you talk to people, there is no sort of shortcut to watching webinars or, it's just the reality. You have to do your own homework. The one thing I will say is that if you are able to call in a couple of vendors, what I found in getting up to speed with something new is you pick a couple of the vendors and then you play them against each other, because they'll tell you, and you say, well, you ask, pick an example, say Palo Alto, and say, so tell me, why is this better than Checkpoint, right? Or whatever. I'm just giving examples, right? Doesn't matter. Or you ask Cisco, why is, and they will usually educate you. And once you have played a couple of ones against each other, I guarantee you'll learn relatively quickly, and it's to the advantage to educate you in some sense, right? And so when you play a couple, 2, 3 against each other, and you go to a startup and you say, hey, so tell me, why is this better than, and that information, I think you'll find after 4 or 5 meetings, you can get up to speed relatively quickly, from experts in the field who have found the weaknesses in competitive solutions out there, and they'll tell you, because it's to their advantage to tell you. And now you're educated, right? That's what we do as analysts anyway, right? So just telling you, this is what I do, and that's how I learn, get up to speed quickly. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think you guys covered it. It is community, obviously. Programs like InfoSec Live, going to the big conferences. Maybe it's
Just lost John.
Oh, I think we've lost him. But I think he was going to round up and basically say there's no easy answer, right? I think, as I was saying, the conferences are good. I think things like this are good. Talking to experts in the field like yourselves is good, which is part of the reasons why we do this. We're obviously coming from the customer side. I struggled with selecting the right solutions. It's a very difficult place to be, because you have to present your ideas to your management team, to your board of directors, to whoever it may be, and you have to stand behind those decisions, and you have to stand behind that technology. So I would go through long periods of time, months or years, trying to figure out what the best technology was, because I had to stand behind that. And I was a big advocate of taking startup technology. I wanted to look at those new technologies, because I really felt in a lot of cases they could bring something fresh. But if you are going to make those decisions to go with a startup, you need to be really, really sure that they're going to do what they say on the tin.
They're going to be still around. in a year as well.
Yeah, I mean, and it was a bit of a bet I took. Yeah, I mean, I think.
Like John, for example, he disappeared again.
Yeah, I mean, he's not got great tech, clearly.
We're not going to buy John, I guess.
But I think we're out of time. I'd like to thank you both for coming on. We've managed to get through the whole show without talking about pineapple on pizza, and that's always a good thing. Again, really thank you for coming on. I hope the audience have enjoyed it, and I hope to meet you in person again soon.
One day. Thank you. Thank you, Simon, for hosting us as well.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.